Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is wonderful to have you here for another episode of the show. Now, my guest today is best-selling author Pete Williams and is the author of a terrific book called Cadence, which is a tale about fast business growth. Now, in our podcast, we discuss a lot of things, but when you're listening to this, I'm going to encourage you to really tune into the 7 levers of fast business growth. I want you to try and understand exactly what those levers are and how you might apply them in your own practice to drive the growth of your practice, but it's also about aggregated incremental wins. So again, please tune in and have a listen for what Pete is talking about. Aggregated incremental wins across 7 areas of your business so that you can basically double your profits every 7 months. So this is a really great podcast, lots of practical tips, lots of strategies there for you to apply and integrate into your practice. I'm going to encourage you to get hold of the book, and you can do that by going to cadencebook.com if you want the hard copy of the book. If you want to get the audio version of the book, you can go to Audible or to iTunes and grab a copy of the audio book as well. Lots of practical things in this podcast. You're going to love it. So again, tune in for those key things. Let me know how you go with it. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. Here's Pete Williams. Pete Williams, good to have you on the show, mate. How's things in sunny Melbourne?
Oh, very well, Doc. Doing well down here.
Good, mate. Lockdown number 6. Hopefully last lockdown. Looking forward to coming out of it, right?
It's been a bit of a crazy 18 months. I think Melbourne's been one of the most locked down cities for the last 2 years. So it's been a very interesting journey. But, we've survived it. We're getting through it. And hopefully at the end.
Okay. Let's look forward. Let's look forward to the future because there's lots of good things to look forward to the future. Mate, you've got a really interesting background. In preparation for our conversation, I've listened to your interviews, I've watched some videos, done all that sort of stuff. And it seems to me that from a pretty young age, you've had that entrepreneurial bug. And I'm just curious to ask you a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey because it's going to set a bit of context for our subsequent conversation. So, were you born that way? Did you learn it? Did you grow up in a family of entrepreneurs? Where did it start?
It's a weird one. Definitely, I wouldn't say born into a family of entrepreneurs. Not my parents anyway. My mum was a high school maths teacher and my dad was in logistics. So definitely not born and bred into it. My grandparents had their own company, so maybe it was in the blood and skipped a generation. But I have always been sort of entrepreneurial. Like Mum loves to tell this story of when I was 3 or 4, I drew arrows all the way down the hallway with chalk or texture as most 3-year-olds do. But apparently, this is Mum's story. Who knows if it's true because I can't recall it. But the way she tells it is that before scolding me and disciplining me, she actually asked, well, why are the arrows? What are they for? And apparently as a 3-year-old, I said, so you can find your way to my office. So nice. There's that scenario. And then another crazy story when I was 16, we went on a basketball tour and to America, and we were in Vegas at the time. And you go and get your photo on a green screen. This is like back in the 90s. So it was kind of, green screen was kind of quite, impressive. Yeah. And you could, take a photo of yourself on a green screen and they put you on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine or Playboy or one of those sort of ones. And I chose Entrepreneur magazine to put my cover on, or my face on the cover as a 16-year-old. So for some reason, I've always been kind of just fascinated by business. I can't sing, I can't dance, but kind of my artistic, creative kind of play is in business, I guess. So,
mate, that's fantastic. And I'm just curious, you didn't choose Playboy to go next to Hugh Hefner or anything?
Yeah, it's a strange one. Yeah, since then, probably a whole separate. I've been to the Playboy Mansion for Halloween party with my wife and a few other crazy stories. That's a whole other one. So I saved the Playboy stuff when I could really enjoy it. Put it that
way. Very good, mate. Very good. All right, mate. So I wanted to ask you about entrepreneurialism, whether people are kind of innately wired that way, or whether you think there's some skills that people can learn to become more entrepreneurial in their approach to life. Because One of the things that I've always wondered is, is it part of the DNA? Is it a skill? Is it nature versus nurture? I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, good question, actually. I haven't probably thought about it a great deal, but the innate response is, I think, the desire to work for yourself and have a business can be, internalized. Some people just prefer to have that bit more, prefer the risk, prefer the autonomy. That there is that sort of, personal values and personal style that kind of leans you towards being a business owner. I don't think necessarily it will being a great business owner or a quote unquote successful business owner is innate. That's a skill that you can learn. I think whether you're a dentist, a butcher, a hairdresser, an accountant, you can be really, really good on the tools and have the passion to be really good on the tools and sort of control your own destiny being a business owner. But then once you're at that point, I think to take the next step to be, quote unquote, a successful business owner, whatever that means for you and your business, I think that's skills you can learn in terms of getting off the tools, having some frameworks to focus on, knowing how and what drives profit in the business. That is just understanding and the discipline to sort of follow through of where to focus your time to actually grow the business to be successful. I think that's a skill you can learn. And, there's plenty of, entrepreneurs, good CEOs, good managers who can run a very successful business. That is not that sort of innate risk-taking business owner self-control gene that comes out. Because still working for a company, they're still, senior managers or CEOs. So I think there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur in terms of that self-control, that freedom, that autonomy versus being a successful business manager. And that can be internal or external. So that's why I'd probably answer it in that kind of context with two different types of approaches.
Well, Mano, I'm curious to dig into all of that in a moment, but you picked up on one of my favorite words, and it's lovely that you've given me a golden thread to just gently pull upon, and hopefully we'll get.
It was like we planned it.
I know, who knew? Ladies and gents, I did say to people when we started, I'm fairly unstructured in the way I prepare for podcasts because I just like to have a chat. So this is as organic as it gets. But you mentioned the word discipline. And, typically I've got an ex-military background. And, discipline has some negative connotations sometimes, and it can have some really positive connotations as well. And I tend to look at it from a really positive point of view. I wanted to ask you about the role of discipline in your own commercial success, because you've had a ton of commercial success, which we'll touch on in a moment. But tell me about discipline. What's that been like for you? How do you see it? How do you embrace it? How do you avoid other parts of discipline if that's appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's a real key. I think that is one of the biggest keys to success for anybody, whether you're in the army, whether you're a dentist. I would think dentistry is very similar to being in aviation in that, you got to follow a process. Otherwise something's going to go wrong, being a pilot or being a dentist. If I'm getting you working in my mouth, I want to make sure you're following the process to get it right. A little slip can cause massive issues. So I think discipline is innate in dentistry, which is really interesting. That ties in with your military background. But in terms of to be a successful business owner or business manager, I think, discipline's huge because it's so easy that you're on the tools all day doing what you do, then to actually get off the tools and work on your business. There is so much out there to do. What do I do next? How do I work on my business? Where do I focus? What do I do? And I think having the discipline to kind of, here's the process I'm going to follow. Here's the system. Here's the regularity. Monday's my marketing day. So Monday afternoons between 3 and 5, I don't see any clients. I'm just working on the marketing of my business. And Thursdays is another thing, having that discipline to actually ensure you're getting off the tools regularly and working on your business. And I think for so many business owners are really, really good on the tools. And I would think dentistry is a perfect fit for that. You could be an amazing dentist. So you kind of lean into where that is. You lean into your preferences and your strengths, which is doing the dentistry work. But then, when you get off the tools, you kind of get a bit overwhelmed of, what do I do? What is the discipline? Where do I focus my time? And you kind of often get overwhelmed by that. So you just lean into more. I'll just do more work. I'll just do more time on the tools. That doesn't help you scale. It doesn't help you really grow. And I think discipline's really important to have that rigidity of regularity of, following some sort of process, system or framework to kind of, know where to focus your attention when you are working on the business and not in the business.
Yeah, and what I'm really loving what you're talking about here is you're talking about a rhythm as well. There's a discipline that we've spoken about and a rhythm. And of course, another word for rhythm is cadence. And did you see that? That's a pretty nifty little segue, I thought.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm feeling a little bit smug at the moment. But of course, Cadence is the name and title of your book. And the subtitle is A Tale of Fast Growth Business. So obviously there's a framework, 7 levers you're going to be talking about in the book, which we'll explore in a moment. But tell me about rhythm and cadence and what it actually means in business, because there's obviously, like Marketing Monday or Team Tuesday or whatever rhythm you put in. Yep. What sort of rhythms do you see in business, whether they're micro rhythms or macro rhythms?
Yeah, I think there's rhythms in terms of just, you think about, the customer journey, like how they go through processes. They figure they've got a problem, they try and find out how to solve it, they find a supplier, they call you up. There's a rhythm to sort of the process of someone buying. But I think there's also a rhythm to sort of growth as well, in that the momentum is another way to think about it as well, as if you kind of get in that rhythm of, whether it's a cycling analogy of cadence, to sort of the pace in which you go, or the rhythm to the cadence of the music, the way you behave, that generally builds momentum. And that is what helps you kind of, scale, not just momentum in terms of things start happening and it grows, but also just the more you do something, the more you get in that rhythm of doing something, you get in that momentum of wanting to do more of it, and you build up that habit, you build up the muscle, you build up that skill set. So the preference to actually work on your business starts to grow, and it's not just always reactionary, kind of leaning back into the tools. So I think there's something in that around that kind of regularity, because it builds that rhythm. And I'm sure, some of the military stuff you could possibly talk to as well, is that the whole idea of there's a lot of regime, pardon the bad pun, or negative connotations of that word, with military that builds momentum. That's how you become a better soldier or Navy SEAL or whatever it might be.
Yeah, 100%. That's a huge part of that. Coupled, cadence and discipline is really a couple of key things. I wanted to talk for a moment about the opportunities for fast growth, because your book is called A Tale of Fast Business Growth. And of course, when we hear, who wants fast business growth, everyone kind of goes, yeah, me, yeah, we all want that, right? But I guess what I wanted to ask you before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it, why is fast business growth a good thing? I mean, again, I understand the obvious thing is better than going slow. I understand that. But what is it that is so enticing about fast growth? Is there something more than just kind of ramping up and then hitting a plateau? And how do you sustain that growth?
Yeah, good question. It's an interesting question. Yeah, get rich quick's obviously the sort of the thing that people often go to, but we're not talking about kind of like get rich quick. I think nothing comes overnight. You have to have that momentum to grow. But I think that the speed comes with momentum. And, we're not saying that, this is get rich quick with anything. Okay, start this business and you're going to triple it tomorrow. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think anyone who sort of says, let's drive 5,000 more inquiries into your practice tomorrow, or let's triple the amount of profit you're making per client tomorrow, is just ridiculous. It's not real. So when I talk about fast, I talk about it's that build up of momentum. It's that build up from cadence that, at the start, you're going to have to put in the work. But as that rhythm comes, as that cadence comes, as that momentum comes, that's where the fast growth comes from. It's not instant, but it's fast because you've put in the work and you grow from there. And I think that's the way I look at it in terms of, I have this philosophy, which we'll probably talk about 10% wins, in that if you understand what is driving revenue and driving profit in your business or practice, and to focus on those areas, and you can just increase each of those with just a small 10% tweak, that actually drives the momentum and drives the growth. It's a bad analogy. It's not a bad analogy, but if we want to stretch the cadence a little bit, one of my favorite stories in cycling is the British cycling team. They sucked. For 30 years, they were terrible. I think in 30 years, they won like 1 medal at the Olympics, barely any Tour de France victories. They were just, a bit of a laughing stock of European cycling, until they hired a new coach called Dave Brailsford. He came in probably about 20 years ago now, really, but he came in and they had a pretty solid foundation. They were a professional team. They were reasonable, but they weren't, successful.
Winning. Yep.
Yeah, they weren't winning, exactly. So he came in and went, well, let's see what we can do to change this. And he took this philosophy of marginal or aggregated marginal gains into the team. And what he did is he looked at things like, what pillow are our cyclists sleeping on when they're on tour to get a better night's sleep?
Yep.
What is the lycra that the suits are made out of to make sure that there's less chafing, and obviously it's going to be a better day on the saddle tomorrow? What about massage oil? He looked at all these sort of smaller 1% type of things, and that was his approach to. And in terms of fast growth, These guys went from basically being nobodies to winning. It was something like 7 out of the following 8 Tour de France, 12 out of the 13 gold medals at the next Olympics. Like, they instantly went really fast, but they had, a foundation of professional cycling with, they weren't amateurs. They didn't come from being they wasn't an amateur team that suddenly were pro. They were still professional cyclists. They had that foundation in place, but they started looking at the right things in the right areas, and that's what helped them get that fast success. And that's sort of how we kind of approach businesses that we're in our portfolio, that we consult with, that we own. It's that same sort of approach.
So let's talk a little bit about that. And in particular, I'd love to hear about JJ. And JJ is the character in the book who I think he was a teacher. I'm assuming there's a bit of a family connection there with mum being maths teacher.
Well, somewhat so not. So, so Cadence, the book, is... we wrote it, well, I wrote it, I say we, but had the editors to sort of actually make it coherent.
I know that feeling well.
Yeah. So the book is a parable. So it's a story based on a true story. So when I was trying to take the framework that we've developed in our companies that have, helped us succeed, it started out as like a more drier style business book. I think lean canvas style. There's there was content there, but it wasn't engaging. So pivoted the book into a story, so it was going to be a lot more engaging for people who don't typically read business books. You can get through it quicker. You get the lessons. I can tell some bad jokes and some bad puns through it, much easier in a story. And it's actually based on a true story. So it's about a bike shop owner that's struggling to grow, and then as a bit of a side hustle has a triathlon coaching business. And he starts coaching an athlete who is a successful business coach or business owner, and the relationship of, the bike shop owner helping Charlie get to his first Ironman triathlon. Charlie, the business owner, helped JJ apply some new principles to his bike store and grow that. So that's the story essentially, and it teaches the framework and the lessons throughout that. And it's based on a true story. My high school PE teacher, he actually opened a bike store, this is 10 years later, opposite my office in St Kilda in Melbourne. So literally one day this new bike shop opens across the road, and it's my high school PE teacher who owns the store. And I raced triathlons relatively seriously in my early 20s, and I made myself a deal that before I'm 30, I'm doing an Ironman triathlon. So literally, he coached me to my first Ironman triathlon. I helped him with his business, and basically that was the foundation for the story. Obviously, there's a lot of more creativity in it, and we kind of expanded and changed the order of the sequence of events and stuff. But basically, that was the foundation of the story of his struggle to kind of figure out what is it that's going to draw revenue in my business, and what is it where I should be focusing my time when I'm not just trying to talk to a client about a bike. How do I actually make sure we grow in the right areas in the right way?
So let's talk a little bit about that, because there are 7 levers that you speak about in your book, and obviously we're looking for aggregated incremental gains across those 7 areas, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of an overview, a high-level overview, then perhaps deep dive into 1 or 2 of those just to explore a bit further down there. Could you just give us a bit of an overview around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the framework to develop out of our companies. We've had our companies for about 15 years now. Our group kind of has grown in different spaces, from e-com to services to product sales. We've got quite a bit of a breadth of offerings, and we've kind of been approving this model throughout all these areas. So basically what we've kind of discovered is there's really only 7 things that drive in any business. Whether you're a dentist, whether you're an e-commerce store, whether you're a retailer, whether you run a consulting business, no matter what it is, there's these 7 areas that basically drive profit. And we kind of figure these out over time, and we're kind of realizing we're hitting glass ceilings, or our revenue is stagnant, or whatever it might be. So effectively, and some of this stuff might not be mind-blowing, but the question I want to suggest to people as they listen to this firstly is just ask yourself the question is, are you spending time specifically focused on each of these 7 areas and looking at how do you influence or grow each of these areas in isolation? Because these are the things you can focus on. And if you focus and tweak these, this is where you get the growth. And we can talk about that in a moment. But fundamentally, so first is suspects. How many people are actually finding out about your business? These are the suspects, people who first hear about your business. They might visit your website. If you're a retail store, it's people who walk into the store. It's some sort of first engagement. So that's your marketing, really. How do you get your awareness to your business to expand? Then the second lever is prospects. And this is basically the percentage of suspects that actually do engage with your business. They take some sort of micro commitment to move towards a purchase, but haven't quite purchased yet. So if we sort of, go analog for a moment and think of a footwear store, it's someone who sits down and tries on a pair of shoes, takes a test drive at the dealership, requests a quote for a phone system solution, or maybe, books an appointment. Potentially could be the way you could describe a prospect for a dentist. Yep. So, the way you take that suspect who kind of first sees about you and encourages them to take a micro commitment is a specific action you can control that will drive more revenue through your business.
Yes.
The third lever is conversion. So how many people who take that micro commitment or become a prospect move forward to actually purchase from you? So they actually, decide to say, yep, I'm going to turn up to my appointment. I'm going to buy the car I've test drove. I'm going to buy the pair of shoes I tried on, whatever it might be. So you've got suspects, prospects, and conversions. So 3 very distinct steps that customers take that you can control. Then when it comes to revenue, you've got average item price and average items per sale. So this is for the products and services you sell. What is the average price that you charge for this? And how can you increase the value, therefore charge a higher price for the services you offer? And when it comes to items per sale, how do you get people to buy the pair of socks with a pair of shoes, the window tinting with the car, the crowns with the teeth, or the whitening package, or the electric toothbrush that you sell at the front desk, or whatever else that you guys, I was going to say shove down our throats, which is probably a good or bad analogy. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, well, it's good. I like it. It's good.
So you've got the average item price and average items per sale. And these are, again, 2 things you can distinctly focus on and change the outcomes in your business. You've got transactions per client. This is the 6th lever. So this is how often do people come back and transact with you again. Now, I know in dentistry, for most dentists, you would absolutely argue hand on heart that most clients don't come back as often as they need to get their checkups. So what are you proactively doing to drive that and, control that outcome and not just wait for someone to come back and rebook? And then finally, you've got your margins. How do you manage the costs, manage the productivity, and manage the efficiency in your business? So they're the 7 levers. You've got suspects, prospects, conversions, average item price, average items per sale, transactions, and margins/expenses. And again, you look at that and go, oh, yeah, okay, I've probably heard these terms before, nothing overly new. But I struggle to find a business owner that is actually proactively looking and measuring at all these things individually, because really they're the only things that drive revenue and profit in a business. So if you're not regularly focused on these 7 areas, thinking, okay, how this month am I going to try and increase our suspects? What am I going to do this month to actually try and improve the amount of clients who come back and repeat business with us, transactions? What am I doing to make sure we get clients to buy more items? How do we get them to buy the toothpaste, the toothbrush, the whitening service, the whatever else that you guys can offer that can increase the amount of items or services someone does when they come into your practice with an appointment? And they're the things we should be focusing on, because the crazy thing that really blew our mind when we kind of stumbled on this, we stumbled on that because in our business, one of our first companies was a telecommunications business that sold phone systems all around Australia. But we didn't have technicians. So we were generating the leads, making the sale, and then literally kind of basically giving the client to a competitor, subcontractor, to actually do the installation, because we didn't have the tech team. And that was great for us. But then we realized over time that where revenue was hitting this class and we weren't growing. So we kind of started to dive through the numbers and work out what the problem was. And we realized we were never getting any repeat business because we were literally giving the client to a subcontractor. So when the client wanted to expand their system or make some programming changes, they weren't going to call us. They were calling the person who actually turned up and did the actual installation and gave them the real, quality service. And that was kind of our awareness going, oh yeah, transactions, we should really do something about this. And we changed our focus. So that was kind of how this whole developed in terms of these 7 areas. And we do focus on these things regularly with our teams. But the crazy thing from that is we started playing with it and looking at it, is we realized this aggregated marginal gains approach actually applies here. And it blew our mind the way it does. In that if you increase each of these 7 areas by just 10%, so let's say you've got 1,000 people coming to your website a month. You do some tweaks to your AdWords campaign, you do a little bit of SEO, maybe you do a small radio commercial, you do Google Places, whatever it might be. I'm sure there's plenty of advice that you guys give through the program to clients that can help them increase their suspects, their web traffic, whatever it might be. So you go from 1,000 to 1,100, just a small 10% win. And you work through each of the levers, and maybe you put an SMS system in place, or you tweak the wording of the SMS that reminds people to come back and book again. Or you encourage clients that if they booked their next appointment today, they might get a free toothpaste tube or something. I don't know. but something to increase transactions per client, encourage them to do that. So you just do these little tweaks that improve those things by 10%. The crazy cumulative effect of that is it actually doubles your profit. The mathematics, it's just basic maths. It's not like, this is pie in the sky or we're trying to make outlandish promises. Just mathematically, 7 small 10% increases in each of these areas actually doubles your profit. So when we kind of realized that, not only did we understand that, these 7 areas was interesting and helpful, but it just changed the scope of what our goals became in our business and where we focus. So literally the way we run our businesses now is we're saying, okay, effectively every month we're picking one lever and we're going to work on how do we get a 10% increase in that. We're going to relook at our proposals. We're going to look at the way our receptionist takes the bookings. We're going to put in a system to make sure we send reminders or phone calls to clients to make sure they actually turn up for their appointment. We get more prospects actually appearing for their booked appointment, whatever it might be. We're going to look at ways we can, encourage clients to actually buy the extra add-on or service that we sell with our solutions. And that is just what we do one month. January, we're doing suspects, hypothetically, 10% win. February, we're going to try and increase our prospects, 10% win. So effectively, every 7 months, we are continually doubling our profit. And that cadence and that rhythm of focus that you spoke about earlier is what drives our fast growth, because every 7 months, we're effectively doubling the profit of our business, and it just scales from there, which is just phenomenal. And that's the thing that, it's achievable. It's like 10% wins are achievable. We're not trying to be Babe Ruth and go, we're going to whack here and go from 1,000 to 5,000 new suspects. We're not going to double your conversion rate tomorrow. We're not going to get twice as many people coming back, because those things are hard to do. But a 10% increase, that's achievable. It gives you confidence. And I think the biggest thing is the confidence of that 10% ability to be achieved actually makes you get to work. Because I don't know about you, but for me, and I see this a lot, is, I'm going to sit down and work on my business. I'm going to get off the tools. I'm going to work on the business. I'm going to try and do an AdWords campaign to grow the traffic to our website, hypothetically. And you read these sales letters and you do these courses. And it's like, we're going to get 3,000 new visitors to your website. And you sit down and go, oh, holy shit, this is a lot of work. So you procrastinate because you feel like you're going to be a failure if you don't get 3,000. And in your gut, you're not going to get 3,000 new visitors from an AdWords campaign tomorrow or a Google Places listing. So you kind of half-ass it and you kind of confuse, progress with procrastination. Whereas with this whole 10% win approach, it's like, oh no, we can achieve that. I have belief I can succeed. Therefore, you're actually more likely to get in and get to work because you only have to hit a 10% win. So your actual goal is more achievable. So you actually do the work and don't procrastinate. And that actually then gets you the results that plays with this framework that actually gets the growth. It's a very weird sort of psychological thing out of it too, which really blows my mind.
Well, it's a self-fulfilling or self-reinforcing cycle, isn't it? And what I really like about what you've just described is the beauty of the system, in my mind, is its simplicity. And of course, behind simplicity is elegance. And it's like that wonderful, I think it's Mark Twain who said it, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. So it takes years to distill everything down to something really workable, really practical. And I think what I really also appreciate about this is, and lots of things I appreciate about it, but the compounding effect, you're absolutely spot on. And it's about not trying to do everything at once. It's just, this month I'm going to focus on suspects. This month I'm going to focus on conversions or whatever lever it is that you're working on. And so I think from a dentist point of view, sometimes, to come back to your point, is it's so easy to lean into what you know. I'm going to do more of what's comfortable. But when they go to sit down at a desk with no appointment book structure to guide their day, I certainly know that I found this very tricky when I got off the tools, is you kind of sit down at the day and go, well, what do I do? I don't have Mrs. Smith coming in at 8:30 or Mr. Jones coming in at 10 or whatever it is. And so you think, so what I really enjoy about this is it gives you focus. It gives you something tangible and practical to put your energy to. And I think that's how you can step out of that comfort zone and move forward. I wanted to ask you quickly around fast growth. What are the mistakes that people make? So people go, I get this, thanks, Pete. That's really awesome. 7 things, 1 month at a time. It's obviously simple, but not easy, because if it was easy, everyone would do it all the time. Where do people stuff it up?
Good question. I think there's a few places. I think the simplicity, people go, oh yeah, I kind of understand the concept of the framework, therefore I can move on.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that, I might need to learn about a particular kind of marketing tactic. And I don't quite comprehend it. So I'm going to lean into it more and kind of actually try and get my head around the tactic. But they forget that you need strategy or a blueprint of where the tactics fit.
Yep.
So I think one of the things is like, people go, oh yeah, this is great. And they go, yeah, this is cool. But then they might hear hypothetically on a podcast or in a training program, wherever it might be, that here's a HR thing to get more efficiency out of your team. And you start going, okay, cool, great. And you kind of start looking at it and playing with it and doing it. But you're not doing it within the context of the framework of your own business. And that's where something like the 7 levers works really well. That, the margins lever, it's about managing expenses. So if you can get your team to be more efficient, not quite sure if it works as well with dentists, but if you can fit in one more appointment a week for one of your dentists or practitioners, that goes straight to the bottom line because the costs are effectively fixed, give or take.
Yep.
So like what you're doing is saying, okay, here's some HR stuff I've learned from a great interview or some great training materials. I'm going to apply it and just think about applying it in the context of managing my margins and my expenses within the 7 levers framework. Or I'm going to figure out this way to do SMSs. I'm going to put an SMS functionality in my business. Maybe the practice management software that we run has SMS functionality. I kind of think it, and I've gone off and I've learned some stuff about it. I've seen some training videos. Having the framework as a way to guide you, go, okay, well, where can this SMS fit? Can SMSs help us get more suspects? Well, not really, because suspects don't know us. We don't know them. So probably not. Can a suspect help with conversions? Yeah, absolutely. If we SMS all the people who make a booking to confirm, therefore that's going to reinforce and drive more people to actually turn up to our appointment.
Yep.
Can we use SMSs to drive more transactions? Yes, we can get people to come back and buy again. Can SMSs help manage our items per sale? Not really. I'm not going to SMS someone when they're sitting in a dentist chair to tell them to buy the toothbrush. No, it's not really going to work for that. So things like the framework, again, is that being that foundation of focus helps you figure out when you come across a tactic or a great idea to apply it to your business within the framework of your company, because you spent the time to first to understand, well, this is what a suspect is for us. This is what a prospect is for us. This is what a transaction is for us. And you can use that as your framework of focus. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they go, oh yeah, I understand the idea. They move on and they go back straight to tactics. And they go, here's an idea. I heard this a while ago. It's probably 12 months ago now. I was actually talking to a dentist and he stumbled across the concept of webinars, right? And he jumped on a webinar training kind of sales video. Like basically it was a course on how to do webinars. And he went and he just fell in love with the idea of webinars. He went off and bought this course. Yeah. Like it was like a $2,000 course on how to do webinars. And he started playing with spending all his time when he was off the tools. So he was off the tools working, quote unquote, on his business. Yeah. And he was doing that by learning about webinars. And I said to him, how the hell is a webinar going to help your business? And he's like, but webinars drive people. We can get people to watch the webinar. What are you going to run a webinar on? Like the best way to prevent cavities, the best way to do a root canal at home? Like, I don't know. Like, and he stood back and went, okay. And we basically quickly said, okay, well, let's look at all the 7 areas here. And you tell me which one's going to be improved by running a webinar. And we stretched it a little bit and figured out, well, maybe doing webinars to past clients about teeth whitening, about braces, about certain things might help drive people back to buy more stuff. And we kind of worked out a way that potentially that might work. And then we got to admit, you know what, it's too much of a stretch, not the best ROI of time. Let's not do it. Yeah. So basically what that framework gave him is he was able to get further faster because it reduced distractions, because he didn't get caught up in the whirlwind of a really great sold tactic or well-marketed tactic. He was like, hang on, let's just pause. Let's go back to the thing and look at what area of my business and the revenue and profit is going to be improved by this. And I was able to use it as almost like a filter. And I think that was super helpful for his growth and his focus and his trajectory. It helped keep him focused when he was working on his business and not in it.
Yeah, love that.
That answers the question. I feel like I've gone on a bit of a tangent. Does that kind of answer the question really a little bit?
No, it's really good because, again, it gives you context about how to apply the framework, but it also gives you a filtering process when all these new tactics are coming towards you, because it is easy to get infobesity and to kind of be overwhelmed with all of the information and kind of go, I'm going to do webinars, or I'm going to do an SMS campaign, or I'm going to do a this or that or whatever. and you can be busy but not productive. So I like the focus it brings. I wanted to ask you, just to change gear for a second, because you've got lots of businesses you run. You've got your headset business and modeling, perfect set of headphones for us right there. Beautiful. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about, just to change gear for a second from profitability and the 7 levers, I wanted to talk about getting off the tools because different mindset. And this is something that I wanted to talk about. To me, it's kind of what we spoke about earlier. It's a bit like going from first base to second base in a sense. When you're trying to get off the tools, you're in this kind of weird no man's land for a period of time. And the tendency is to go back to what you know rather than to progress to where you want to go. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the transition from technician to business owner in a more permanent sense. So it's good to say I'm going to spend an hour or two a week working on my business. And I think most people could understand that. But there's a group of people that say, I don't want to spend an hour or two working on my business. I just don't want to be in delivery anymore.
Yeah.
Can we just have a bit of a talk about your observations of that?
Yeah, I think there is that time where you do kind of, get bored with a particular type of thing. I think, it's potentially boredom for a lot of business owners. You've been on the tools for so long that, I'm done with this.
Yep.
So, pivoting onto the business rather than in the business is the way to do that, to sort of keep the business going, keep the revenue, keep the sustainability. So I think that's really important. I also just, on the other side of that coin, some people just love what they do.
Totally.
And that's absolutely fine. So if you want to hire a practice manager to grow the business, that's great. But using something like the framework as the way you keep them focused and them reporting to you, well, what are you doing this week to drive the business through this lens? And that could be your way you keep your team accountable if you don't want to get off the tools because you are passionate about cavities. That's fine if you are. But to sort of talk directly to sort of that transition off the tools, I think, as I said before, and not to sort of be too repetitive, but I think the idea of 10% wins actually gives people more confidence to get off the tools in that you don't have to sort of try and revolutionize your business overnight. It's like, no, just get off the tools one afternoon a week or, one afternoon a fortnight and just go, I'm going to work on this particular lever and this is my focus. I'm going to try and improve this part of my business. And you go, hey, I achieved a 10% win here. Tick, confidence. I'm good at being off the tools. Next time you're off the tools, what's the next thing you're going to focus on? And that's, I think, a problem for so many business owners is like they've heard the whole movement that was, the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. People aren't familiar with that. He was sort of the first vocal advocate for in versus on. He was all about getting off the tools and work on your business. And that was a phenomenal book. But I think the problem with that is actually caused almost just as much harm as it was trying to solve. The one thing he didn't do was actually tell you what to focus on. He made the whole argument about getting off the tools and work on your business, but gave you no direction or blueprint of where do you focus then when you're working on your business. And it left a lot of people running around with their head cut off like a chicken. And it's like, I'm off the tools. Well, where do I go? What do I do? And then at the end of the day, people are off the tools making no progress because they don't know what to actually do. Therefore, business goes backwards because they're billing less because they're not in the practice actually, scalpel in hand. They're off the business doing a whole bunch of stuff that's just distracting, possibly spending money in areas that don't actually make a difference. So the business actually goes backwards.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a massive problem for people who make that transition off the tools.
Yep.
And whether it's a 7 levers framework or some other sort of system or blueprint you have, I think that's the important thing to guide your direction of, okay, this is where you should be focusing because these are the things that matter. And what you do in each of those areas can be completely up to you. How you improve transactions, you can have that freedom and that choice and that creativity, but at least you have that discipline that you spoke about earlier, saying that I'm working on transactions. This is where I'm focusing when I'm working on my business. I'm trying to improve the transactions of my business. And I think that's where having that kind of discipline and that kind of framework to go full circle becomes really important. You still get that flexibility and creativity within each of the areas, but you know what areas to focus on. Because you can spend a whole bunch of time sort of, playing with Xero in your accounting software and looking at reports and looking at numbers. It's like, well, who gives a shit? Is my profit growing? Am I managing my expenses? Great. There's nuance within that, but there's I don't know if you've ever spoken about this before, but there's this term called vanity metrics.
Oh, yes.
Which ties in with, dentistry, vanity. I'm trying to put some bad puns. It's the best I can do. So I apologize to the
You're
listeners.
all good, mate. It's good. Love it.
But I think we can get so caught up when we're working on our business with vanity metrics. These are metrics and things that don't actually move the needle, that don't really bloody matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we overcomplicate it. And I think, I've had a podcast before, so I'm just as guilty as anybody, is that in that bucket, is that business advisors, consultants, there's a lot out there that are just trying to sell vanity metrics as a medium just to keep themselves busy and be able to sell some random course. So I think it's really important to say, hang on, what actually matters, and focus on that. And that's sort of where things like this can be super helpful for people.
Yeah, I really appreciate you raising the topic of vanity metrics, because sometimes, look, this is probably me just getting on a hobby horse. I'll get on quickly, then I'll hopefully get off.
Let's ride it together, mate.
I'll try not to turn the key in my back and just off we go. But one of the things that I see a lot of in dentistry is, people talking about top line revenue. And of course, we understand revenue is important. I get it. I get it. I understand it. But it is 1/umpteenth of the story. And social media, being what social media is, allows people to talk about all the sorts of things they want to talk about. But it probably drives me a little bit batshit crazy, to be honest with you, when I hear people go, I'm billing out, $5 million, $10 million, however many $1 million. That's awesome. And I'm happy for you. But I'm more interested in what's falling to the bottom line, and how you're doing it, and whether you're enjoying it, and what sort of value you're adding to the community, all of those sorts of things. So vanity metrics is a really good thing. I'm curious to ask you about, in your business experience, what other vanity metrics you've seen?
Oh, I think there's lots of stuff in terms of, you can really get nitty gritty with your analytics on your website. And it's like, well, really, at the end of the day, it's how many people are coming there, how many suspects you've got, and how many actually then engage with your business. They're the two things that really matter. Yep. Suspects, how many suspects you're getting, if that's your definition of suspects.
Yep.
And then what percentage become prospects, engage with your business.
Yep.
All the nuance of that is kind of very, very kind of possibly relevant, possibly important, but not worth reporting on. You look at you that and go, okay, yep, it's helping. No, don't report on those sort of things. I think they're the kind of stuff that you can get really nitty gritty in. A whole bunch of accounting reports can be, helpful in some areas, but not, really for the sake for most businesses. It's just like, well, what's our overall P&L? Great. Are we managing our expenses? How do we potentially, manage that a little bit better and get more efficient and improve margins? Yeah. And that's kind of it. And I think you can definitely kind of get on these like waterfalls of just going really fast over the edge and something that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, 100%. Mate, you've been very, very generous with your time today, and I've really enjoyed talking about Cadence, and I've really enjoyed hearing about the 7 levers. But before we wrap up, I'm a cricket fan. I love cricket. My own cricketing career was cut tragically short by an acute lack of talent. And so if I was in a cricket team, Glenn McGrath would be opening the batting and I'd be 11 still. Let's just to give you that's my batting prowess.
Love it.
But I want to ask you about the MCG.
Yeah.
So
Australia's Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, tell me. Hit me with it, mate. $500 a piece, right?
Crazy, yeah. So basically, long story short, when I was 21, I sold the MCG, which is, for those who possibly overseas, the Melbourne Cricket Ground is our version of Yankee Stadium. It's a 100,000 seat stadium. It's basically the mecca of sport in Australia. Yeah. And I sold that for $500. Essentially what happened was I was reading a book called The 1 Minute Millionaire. Now, I don't recommend you read it. It's not a great book, but it changed my life. There was like literally one paragraph in one chapter that just really resonated with me. And it referenced really quickly the story of a guy in the 1980s that bought all the timber that was part of the walkway of the Brooklyn Bridge between Brooklyn and Manhattan in New York City. And word around the campfire is that he sold certificates up with basically think of it like an A5 size certificate with a history of the Brooklyn Bridge and an inch by inch square of timber, and then sold them and made like $2 million out of it. And I read that argument, this story reference. I went, this is bloody brilliant. How do I kind of rip that off and replicate that here in Australia? And made a few phone and realized the MCG was under its redevelopment. So part of the grandstand had just been pulled down because they were renovating it. And I remember going to the footy and to cricket with my dad and sitting on those really uncomfortable wooden seats because the grandstand was from the 1970s at the time. So I made a few phone calls and found the wrecking company that was doing the demolition and said to them, do you have any of the timber left? Like, what are you doing with all the old timber? And they're like, well, yeah, we're a wrecking company. We're just getting paid to pull it down, but we've got a whole bunch of stuff sitting in our yard and our warehouse. And they're like, oh, we've also got some carpet. I know that sounds really weird, but part of the MCG is a members area, which is really quite prestigious, really hard to get into. But the carpet is also really famous. It's dog ugly, but it had the actual logo or the crest of the MCG.
Yep.
And I was aware of that. And they're like, oh, we've got some of the carpet from the members' dining room that's sort of in the warehouse we don't know what to do with. I'm like, I'll buy it. So I bought it all over the phone and made a series of memorabilia pieces up with a photo of the MCG, a piece of this carpet, and a plaque. And then basically wrote a press release, 21-year-old sells the MCG for $500. And it went absolutely bonkers. And that was sort of my first massive business project when I was 21 years old, was, effectively selling the MCG, this, $100,000 multi-million dollar stadium for effectively $500 a piece.
Nice. Well done, mate.
Yeah, actually, I think if people who are watching, here we go. Here's a non-glassed old battered version. But for those who are watching the live video, that's what the frames look like.
Oh, there we go. Mate, I think I have to agree with you about the carpet.
Yeah.
It's special.
But it's not attractive, but it's very, very well known.
But it's very, very well known, very famous. And anyone in Australia who loves cricket would know that symbol, that logo really well. So that is fantastic, mate. I love it. It's awesome.
It's a crazy little adventure, and literally still selling frames to this day. Not those ones, because that's completely battered, but definitely, like, we still sort of sell a few frames a year. It was, and this is like almost 20 years on now, which is pretty crazy. People just have this passion for the MCG, and it's a great gift for parents who kind of were maybe ex-cricketers or ex-footy players or passionate about their sports team. It's pretty cool.
It's awesome. I love it. What I also really love about that is the whole premise of my podcast is not invented here. I love the way you've been able to take an idea and adapt it and apply it. And I think there's some real insight around what are the ideas that come from other industries or other experiences, and how can I apply them to my own learnings, my own practice, my own whatever. So thank you for
that's the idea of some of the 10% wins as well, is like when you're trying to figure out how do I get a 10% win in some of these areas, to swap stuff from other industries that are doing stuff differently that you can apply to your business. The analogy I always use, which I love, is that you think of McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, KFC, just fast food in general. You think drive-through, you think takeaway drive-through. That's kind of what most people think about. But the crazy thing is the fast food industry actually stole the concept of the drive-through from banking, which is just absurd to think that banking was innovative, that, drive-through banks in America actually were around before drive-through takeaway fast food.
Wow. I've never seen a drive-through bank.
Yeah. There's one in Geelong. There's still one. There's one in Geelong, Victoria, the Bendigo Bank on Shannon Avenue, I think it is.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Shannon Avenue. Yeah. So there's a drive-through bank in Geelong that still exists to this day, but in America, it's still relatively common, but they were there first. Drive-through banks were well before drive-through fast food. So there's an idea of an industry that's basically synonymous with drive-through. They actually took the idea from a very boring industry and applied it to their own.
I think that's fantastic. That is absolutely awesome. Hey, Pete, once again, mate, you've been an absolute trooper and been a lot of fun talking to you, mate. You're a great conversationalist, a wonderful guest. And ladies and gents, grab a hold of the book, Cadence, and the subtitle of the book is A Tale of Fast Business Growth. You can get the book at lots of different places, but head across to cadencebook.com, grab yourself a copy. As Molly Meldrum would say, do yourself a favor.
And for podcast listeners, there's an audio book, which has got some really cool, interesting bits in it. Because it's the story, we actually put a bit of a soundtrack. So it won Audiobook of the Year a few years ago. So if you're a podcast listener, I'm going to assume you like the audio type process. So check out the audiobook, because I think that's probably going to be even more fun to listen to than reading the book.
Do you narrate it?
I don't. I made the choice for two reasons. One is just too busy to kind of sit there for a full day recording audio. And it was going to be much more engaging as a story if it was read by a professional voiceover artist, because we wanted to make it really engaging. And then, it went to the production house to do the edit, and they threw in a bunch of sound effects. It's pretty cool because, like, obviously being a story is, things like, it's going to be the worst example. So don't take this as the example to sort of entice you to buy the book. Take everything else we've said to be the reason to buy the book. But at one point, he's running along the beach and the narrator talks about, as Charlie runs on the beach thinking about the business or whatever it might be, you start hearing waves and some seagulls in the background. So it kind of actually makes it a really engaging listen, which is really cool. So, and people must like it because it won audiobook of the year a few years ago. So,
well, that's awesome. Check it out, indeed. And so that audiobook would be on Audible.
Audible, iTunes, where all good audiobooks are sold.
There we go. All right. Well, once again, mate, thank you for your time today. You've been an absolute star. And ladies and gents, grab a hold of the book. There's lots of really good pearls of wisdom in there. I hope you not just read the book, but apply what's in the book so you can, really develop your own cadence in your own business and achieve the things that you want to achieve. And that's obviously the point of today's conversation. So again, mate, you're a gem. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Love to be here.
Cool, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.